Welcome. Thanks for attending this Excel session today where we're going to look at the format as table features that are built into Excel. Okay, let's make a start. The format as table feature was added to Excel way back in 2007. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't get used as much as it should. It's a really powerful feature. It's got a couple of reasons why people, I think, don't use it. So one of them is it says format on it. So people think it's just a formatting thing, but it's not. It's actually a data thing. So, and I'll show you and demonstrate that today. So format as table is the button. So that's what we're going to be using. And what I'd like to do, so bear with me, I haven't done this very often. I've got to try and track down. Whoop, there's a poll. I'm just going to launch it now. So if you've got, some of you will have the poll pop up. Some of them won't, because I think it's because it's a pop-up. Some of your browsers might be blocking the pop-up. Some people are voting, so that's really good. Thanks for that. So I'll share the results once I've let you had a chance to vote. Now, format as table. And so, yeah, I just want to get a feel for how many people are already using it. So while you're answering that, format as table works pretty seamlessly with so many different parts of Excel, like pivot tables, Power Pivot, Power Query, something called relationships, which I'll show you later in the session, which you might not have seen yet. Okay, so I think people have stopped voting. So let's have a look. I'll end the poll. And I can share the results. I don't know what that will look like on your screen, but 21% use formatted tables all the time. That's unfortunate. I would hope it would be like 50%. This is really, really important stuff. And some people use it, so sometimes, so 60% isn't too bad for actually usage. 30% have heard about them, but never use them. So hopefully that 30% is the people who will see what you can do with it and start using it now. And some people have never heard of them. So, and that's the problem. Now that's only 8%. Now that surprises me, because usually a lot of people are just unaware of the formatted table. So that's a fairly low percent. So that's a good thing. So at least 60% are using them sometimes, so that's a good start. Okay, so we'll clear that. Thanks for voting on that one. Okay, so let's look at the manual. So on page 2 of the manual, there are a few rules. So when you're creating a formatted table, don't have blank rows or blank columns in your data. Now, it's okay to have a column that doesn't have any data in it, providing it's got a heading. So that's okay. But don't insert a whole blank column into your data before you create your format as table, or a whole blank row, because that slows you down. Because when Excel sees either a blank row or a blank column, it stops trying to estimate the range for the row, for the table. Okay, so in general, avoid inserting blank rows and blank columns in your data before you create the format as table, before you use the format as table feature. Now, I know some people like to put like a visual break in their data. So we're going to look at this data a little bit later, but if you want to put like some sort of visual break in there, don't insert a row, just change the row height. Just make the row higher. So if you want some sort of white space in there, just make one of the rows higher if you want to do some sort of visual break in there. So, but don't insert a blank row. Okay. Now, a bit of note on terminology. When you work with a lot of features in Excel, a column is a field. So we're going to look at a very quick look at a pivot table later, and pivot tables call columns fields. Now this is a database term. So a column is a field. So and a row is a record in databases. So that one's easier to remember because row and record both start with R, but the field is a column. So just a note on terminology there. Now, right-clicking. If you don't already right-click, I highly recommend you start, because there's a few right-clicks that work with data and lists and things. One of them is filtering, and one of them is sorting. So sorting and filtering. There's actually extra functionality in the right-click with a formatted table as well, which we'll see today. So one thing that a lot of people are not aware of is color, in terms of being able to sort by color and to filter by color. So that's something that was added again a few versions back. So you can have color and you can sort and filter by it. So just a heads up on that. Okay, so that's right clicking. Okay, page 3. So this is format as table. That's the button up there. There is another button, by the way. So on the insert tab, you can use this table option here. You can see the keyboard shortcut, Control and the letter T is another way to do it. I tend to use the home ribbon. When you click, so to do it, click anywhere in your table, click the drop down, pick a color, any color. I'll go for orange today. Now have a look. Excel has guessed the range. Now there's a couple of things it uses when it does this guess or estimation. It looks for a bold header row. So in general, if you can bold your headers, that helps Excel identify the header row. And so this will be ticked here. My table has headers. And then it looks for the blank rows and the blank columns. And that's how it estimates the range. So that's why I tell you don't have blank rows and blank columns in the data before you create your table. So we can just click OK now. And that has created a formatted table. So it's a different color, but it's not about formatting, okay? It's got this alternating colors, which is really cute, but it's not a formatting feature, it's a data feature. The color helps identify the table as different, so it's different to the rest of the sheet. So that's a good thing. Notice that it's also put the drop down for filtering and sorting, so they're all there. It's put the different color on the header row, so that's again identifies the header row. When we look at another example, I'll show you something else that it allows you to do, but here's the really cool part about it. If I want to add another code to the bottom, okay, it automatically expands the table to include that. Even though I haven't really put any other data in, I can basically, we've got yellow, let's create a yellow. So I can create my own extra rows very easily. It automatically extends down. Okay, so that's one thing. Now that extension, so the automatic extension applies to rows and to columns. So let's say I want to work out the margin here. So we've got the price and the cost. So when I type in margin, as soon as I hit enter, Excel is going to recognize that as an extra column in the table. And it extends the table across and it includes all the functionality. So again, I've got the drop down there for margin. Now let's have a look at something that's different when you're using a formatted table to a normal Excel formula. So I'm going to create a calculation. I'm going to deduct the cost from the price to work out the margin. Here we go. Equals. So I'm going to use my left arrow key and I'm going to select the price in F2, but it's not going to say F2. It's going to say square bracket at price, close the square bracket. This is what is called a structured reference, and it's associated with tables. And what it's saying is, grab me the price column from the same row. So the @ symbol means grab me the same row in the price column. Then I'm going to go subtract, and I'll use my arrow key again, and I'm going to select the cost. So you can see up here in the formula bar that it's saying price subtract cost. It's almost readable, so you can figure things out. Instead of saying F2 minus E2, it's saying price less cost. Now, here's one of the really cool aspects of formatted tables. When I hit enter, that formula is going to be copied all the way down the table. Okay, so all I did was hit enter, and that formula has been copied down. Now, one interesting part of the formula is that it's identical in every single cell. Because it's using that @ symbol, it's not, this one now isn't F8 minus E8, it's still price minus cost, because the @ symbol means grab me the row. And the color coding is the same. You can see the color coding is working okay. Now, this will extend if I add another code to the bottom. Pick a color, we'll go white. I don't think I've got white. So that formula automatically copied down, even though there was nothing in the row when after I added the code, it's still copied down. So it's built into the table to copy the formula down. You don't have to think about it, which is really, really good. Okay, so someone's saying they can't see my screen. So maybe if you log out and log back in again, you might have some more luck there. Okay, so that is the quick intro to formatted tables. Let's see one of the downsides. It's not really a big downside. It's just something you need to be aware of. So let's say we want to copy this margin across, or we want to copy something across. Control T, done that. I'm just reading my own instructions here. Okay, I might leave it there. Oh, names, that's an important part. So these structured references are referring to the column. You can also refer to the whole table. Now, you may have noticed that when I'm in the table, there is a table design tab at the top here. So you can change your colors. So if you change your mind on your colors, you can change that. On the far left-hand side, there is a generic table 1 name. Now, you need to have a unique name for your tables. They're a little bit like range names. I don't know if people use range names, but there are some limitations. You can't start with a number, and you can't use some symbols and stuff like that. And you're not allowed to use spaces. So what I tend to do when I'm naming it is I will use a prefix of TBL for table, and then I will give it then the descriptive name. So this one's a parts table, so I'll call it TBL parts. You don't have to do that. That's something that I do. That's a convention that I stick to. It has its advantages because when you're creating a formula, if you type TBL, you'll get a listing of all of your tables there, because once you start using tables, it can be a little bit addictive and you might have a lot of tables in your file. And so having a prefix like that makes it easy to get a list of all of those tables. Okay, so TBL parts is the name of the table. Now, I'll show you how you can actually do a calculation using that name. So let's say I want to add up the margin equals sum. There's a few ways to refer or to get the reference in there. So one way is to click in, well, the long way is to select the range. So I'll do that again. So when you select the range, up until there, it's a normal garden variety Excel range, G2 to G8. But when you select that last entry, it changes into what's called a structured reference. So TBL parts, square bracket, margin, and then square bracket. So that's saying TBL parts is the table name and margin is the column name. So what this is saying is add up the margin in that column, or add up the values in that column, which it's adding up to that. Now, if I go and add another code to the bottom here, pick another color. We'll go black. Okay, so that has automatically updated. You can see the color coding still works. It's telling you the range that's being added up. And basically that's brilliant because you don't have to worry about the table expanding. So as the table expands, that name, TBL parts margin, will always include everything in the margin column. So you no longer have to worry about people adding something to the bottom of a range that you've selected or you're using in a formula. Now I'm going to do a VLOOKUP. Yes, there is an XLOOKUP now. Can you add a total? You can add totals. There is a, if you, someone's asked a question, can you add a total row? You can add a total row. So look, while I'm here, I'll show you some other things. When you right click within a table now, I'll just show you why this is different to what normally might happen. Okay, so I've just put some sequential numbers down there, and I'll come back to show you why they're important in a minute. When you right click within a formatted table, the insert and delete are working within the table. They're not working on the whole row, which is something you might do. So I can insert a row, a blank row. Let's go insert table rows above. So that puts a blank row in. Notice that even though it's a blank row, it still has the formula there. Notice that it didn't affect column J. So column J had those sequential numbers, so there's no blanks in there. So that inserted the row in the table, not anywhere else. If there was something underneath the table that might have affected that, but in this case, it's inserted a row. And you can also right click and delete a row. Okay. Someone asked about the total. So you can right click and add totals here. So under table, totals row, and it's adding up a total for the margin, which you can see equals that. It uses the subtotal function too, by the way. I don't know if you're aware, the subtotal function is one of the few functions that works with visible cells. So 109 at the front here means do a sum, but only add up the visible cells. So if I filter this by, let's say I filter it by a color, I don't know if there's how many blues there are. There's 2 blues. That's interesting. Why did that get a value error? Okay, that's a new one on me. That one should have worked. More functions. Okay, so there we go. That's something I haven't seen. That one should be adding up the margin, but it isn't. Okay, if anyone has seen that, did I change the formula? Or can I change the formula? I deleted the formula. No, deleting the formula shouldn't have affected that. That's because that's let's undo that. Okay, interesting. Table name, that's a value, subtotal margin. Oh, F2, what's that? Oh, 109, sorry. Now I see what you're saying. Yes, I had inadvertently changed the subtotal. That's why it was a value error. Let's do that. Got to be careful when you're editing formulas. Okay, let's try that again. Let's go blue. There we go. So that's adding up only what's called the visible cells. So it's because I filtered And by the way, when you apply a filter, it changes the row numbers to blue. So you know that there's a filter in place whenever you see a blue row number. You can sort of track down the filter by looking for a slightly different icon on the drop downs there. So I'll get rid of that. Okay, so 109 means only add up the visible cells in the formula. Okay, thank you for spotting that I edited the formula there. Okay, so I am now going to do a VLOOKUP. Now, I know there is an XLOOKUP, but a lot of people do not know the XLOOKUP exists yet, so I'm just going to use an example that people are aware of. So I want to look up, let's say I want to look up the code 4567. So I can use my VLOOKUP to look up this code in the table. Now, the table has a name now, TBL, and you'll notice that TBL parts pops up there, so I can hit my tab key, comma. Now in Excel, in VLOOKUP, you need to give it a number. So let's say I want to extract the color. So the color is the third column, and I want what's called an exact match. If you're using VLOOKUP, you might use true and false at the end there. You can actually just use 1 and 0. So 0 means false. So that formula there is going to look up the number 4567, and we're going to extract out the color. So that should give us blue. And there we go. So, and if we would change it, so if I go 6677, I get the black at the end. So you can use the table name by itself to refer to the table. And that's great for things like VLOOKUP. You can also use XLOOKUP with this as well. Yes, you can also use this for index and match calculations. So index match is a little bit more flexible than VLOOKUP. XLOOKUP is a little bit more simple than index match as well. So just a heads up on that. Couple of things in terms of shortcuts. I'm just going to get rid of the, can I get rid of the total line here? Yep. Okay, so I just got rid of the totals. What I wanted to show you was this. So the tab key, that's what the tab key normally does. So if you're in an Excel sheet, if I go over here and hit tab, you'll see it goes to the right. When you're in a table, it works a little bit differently. So I'm in the very last cell of the table. When I hit tab now, it actually, so it inserts another line, so a row. So it's assuming that you're like doing data entry. So you can use the tab key, which when you are doing data entry, the tab key is typically used. And so again, I can put another code in. I'll do a widget this time. Make that one black. There we go. So the tab key will insert another row at the end of the table. If you're on the very last, if you're here and hit the tab key, it actually just takes you to the next row. It doesn't insert it, it just takes you to the next one. It's only when you get to the end here that it will insert a blank sheet, sorry, a blank row. You can use Control+ to insert a row. So before I right clicked and I used insert, but if you hold the Control key down and press the plus sign, now I've got a full-size keyboard here, so it's a lot easier. You can see that that inserts the row, and Control- deletes. If you've got like a cut down keyboard or a laptop keyboard, you got to go Control Shift and the equal sign. The minus, however, has its own sign, so you can just go Control that. To select the table, Control A will select the data, and press it again, Control A, and it will select the heading. If you press Control*, it selects the whole table in one go. So a couple of options there. If you want to select a whole row, then you can use the Shift and the space bar. Okay, so Shift and the space bar. I need to show you how to select columns too. I didn't keep going on that. And then Control space bar will select the whole column, which is what I wanted to show you. So let's go and do this sum again. So equals sum. Now I showed you how to manually select a column. Let's show you another way. So you can just click a single cell in the column and then use Control Spacebar, and that will select the whole column. So even if it goes down thousands of rows. So that's one way. Here's another way. This one's trickier. Let's see if I can do it. Now I am using a larger mouse icon, so this might be tricky, but here we go. Let's see if I can do it. There we go. If you get this little black arrow icon that's above the column, you can select that with the mouse, and that will select the column as well. So you can do it manually. You can use Control and the space bar, and you can also use this icon, this little black icon here, to select the whole column, which is something you do fairly regularly. You can use range names with table names, which we'll see an example of soon. Okay, let's summarize this data. So here's some big data. We got, I don't know, 5,000 rows here. It's just sales data. Let's bring that back in. So I'm going to format it. I'll use the keyboard shortcut, Control and the T. Now, when you use Control T, it gives you the default color. You remember last time when I clicked the button, I got to choose the color. Well, this time just uses the default color, which in my case is blue. So there we go. You can change the default color too. So just be aware of that. So there's my data. And now I'm going to summarize this using SUMIFS. We'll do it with a pivot table a little bit later, but we're going to use the SUMIFS function. Now, you might have used SUMIF. Someone's asked to demonstrate XLOOKUP. If we've got time, I might do that at the end. Okay, now you might have used SUMIF, which is a single criteria sum function. I don't teach that anymore. I only teach SUMIFS, which is an S on the end, because it's multi-criteria. So here we go. So SUMIFS, and you need to tell it the range you want to add up. So in this case, I'm going to use this sales data. Oh, I need to give it a name first. Let's do that. So table design, I'm going to call this TBL sales. So you click in the table design, far left-hand side. I've got the prefix TBL and then sales. There we go. That's better. You can name it afterwards as well. It's going to use like a generic table 1, table 2, but you can rename it afterwards and it will all flow through as well. So there's no problems renaming a table unless you are using something like Power Query, which captures the table name. So in formulas, there's no problems. Okay, so equals SUMIFS. The first thing you need to do is select, I'll get it in a minute, oh, by the way, I'll do that again. I use the tab key. So I'll type in as much as I can, and then I'm going to use my arrow key to select SUMIFS, and then I'm going to hit the tab key, and that puts the opening bracket there. So that's something I do fairly regularly. Now I need to tell it the range to add up, which is going to be, let's go back here. It's going to be the value, which is the sales value. So I'm hoping if I click that, there we go. So it's going to, that's the volume. What do I want the value? Value's there. So there's the sales value, comma. Now I want to add up based on the category. I think it was category and state. Yes, it is. So I'm going to then select the category column. There we go, comma. Now, you could go back to that sheet and select the category. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put a placeholder in of a 1. Now, 1 means absolutely nothing, but it just is a placeholder because I need to link to the cell that has the customer category. And the reason is I don't have to keep going back and forth between the sheets. Okay, next one was the state. So that's here. Oh, by the way, this little helper section can get in the way. When it does, if you get this four-headed arrow, you can just drag it out of the way, and then I can get my arrow key here for state, comma 2. So the 1 and the 2 at the moment mean absolutely nothing, but they just are placeholders so that you don't have to keep going back and forth between the various sheets. I'm going to hit enter now, and it's going to have 0 there because it's not right at the moment. I'm going to select the 1 and select government. Now I need to copy this across. So I need to fix the A, and the 2, I'm going to click on B1, and I need to fix the 1. I'm pressing the F4 function key there, by the way. If you didn't know, it adds in the dollar signs to, I'm just keep pressing it and it keeps changing the dollar sign. So that one needs to be a dollar A2, and that needs to be $1, and that's it. So I can copy that down. Let's format it and copy it down. That's all good. Now, here's the warning with formatted tables. You can't drag this formula across. Well, you can, but it will be wrong. So here we go. Okay, now they're all wrong because when you look at the formula, things have changed. TBL, this used to be value, and now it's cost. This used to be customer category, and now it's sales rep. Let's go have a look at the table. What happens is it treats it like a relative reference. So where it was customer category, when we copied it across, it changed to sales rep. The value changed to cost. That is not intuitive. I would have thought it would just copy it as is. But as you copy it across, each column changes. So then we end up with margin. This is the weird one. We go back to date. So it cycles through all of the columns. So margin was the last column in the table, and then it jumps back to date here. That is not intuitive. So when you're using a table reference like this, or a structured, it's called, the technical term is a structured reference, but I just call them table names because it makes more sense. When you want to copy it, just use copy paste. So Control C, Control V, and I need to widen it, and it's all good. I'll just add this up to make sure. Actually, I'll show you a little trick. If you want to put sum functions in here and in here, what you can do is select that range and then click your auto sum, and it will put the sum functions in for you. Okay, so let's do a quick sum on the value just to make sure we are picking up everything. So there's the value, control space. Whoa, we're not picking up everything. There we go. See, that's a good test. I think there may be another, let's check the states. I'm not sure I've got all the states listed. We got ACT? No. Okay, so we can insert ACT, copy, paste. Oh, getting there. So there's a couple of other ones. There might be Northern Territory as well. Why is that? Oh, there we go. One more. Let's try Northern Territory. Oh, I've got my caps lock on. Again, copy, paste. Don't drag it. A little bit. Okay. There's a lot more states in here than I thought. I was actually going to show you this later. I'm going to do it now. Let's equals unique. So this is a brand new function in Excel. It's unique, and it's going to give me the unique states. Okay, there are all the states there. I think looks like I missed out Tassie as well. I think I got the rest. Let's try Tassie. And you can drag it as well, but don't use. There we go. We got it. We've balanced. Okay, so we're going to do that later, a lot easier using a pivot table later, but that's the SUMIFS version. Now, as I mentioned, you can't drag that formula across. You can copy it. You can use Control D as well, or someone mentioned Control R. You can do that as well, because that is a copy. I'll do that. I'll show you that one. So if I get rid of that. Okay, so if you select the range, I'll just scroll out a little bit. There we go. If I select the range like that, Control R will copy to the right, which is what the R stands for. And that's a copy and a paste, so that works. And I think Control D as well. I think that stands for duplicate. No, Control D doesn't work. Control R is working there. But Control R is basically replicating a copy and a paste. You can't use the drag. Okay, basically you can't use the fill handle to drag across as it stands. So what you can do is create some range names. Oh, Control D is copy down. Sorry, that's right. if you had the copying down isn't the issue. So Control D, isn't really a problem. It's copying across that causes the problem. Okay, so what I'm going to do is show you another way to create a formula like this, but I'm going to use range names. So here we go. I'm going to select the customer category, Control space. I'm going to click in the name box and I'm just going to call that category. Okay, with a capital C. I always have a capital letter in my range names. So this is called the name box, and this is going to name that range. Okay, and this one I'm just going to call state. Now this one needs to be just state, not states, because I'm going to use that later. So that's state. You must press enter as well. And then the last one, am I going to use value? That's there. Sales value. I'm going to call that sales value simply because there is a function called value. So rather than get them confused, I'm going to use sales value. This is a range name. This is very similar to the table name. Now, range names are a whole nother topic. So I'm just briefly showing you that you can use range names with these formatted tables. Hit enter. So now I can go back to the formula here and I can get rid of all these, because this one's called sales value. That's called category. And as well as shortening the formulas, this can be copied across. Okay, so that's the range names. And range names, even though they're referring to the formatted tables, they don't change. Okay, so we've got sales value, category, and state. They automatically expand as well. Okay, so when they're related to a table, the range names will automatically expand. And let's see an example where you want that to happen. Data validation. So here we have a list of states. Again, we've only got 4 there. Now I'm going to create a formatted table here very quickly. There we go. And I'm going to call it, am I going to call it something? TBL state. TBL state. They're trying to get Microsoft to allow you to name it when you create it, but it's sort of a 2-step process at the moment. So that's what you've got to do. Now, I can't refer to this table. Well, sorry. Okay. A couple of things here. If you're in the same sheet as the table, you can just refer to the range and it will automatically expand. If you're in another sheet, so if this drop down, I'm going to put a drop down in here. If this drop down is in another sheet, then you have to use a range name to get this effect. So I'm going to show you the range name solution. So I'm going to select that and just call that states. Okay. So that should have worked. I'll just double check. You can check all your range names in formulas and name manager. This also lists all of the tables. So we've got 3 tables there now. And there's states, which I've just created a name for. Okay. And when you click it, it tells you what it's relating to down the bottom here. So states is the one I want to use. So the quick way to get into data validation, which is how you create a drop down in a cell, is you press 3 keys in sequence. The Alt key, you don't hold them down, D, and the letter L. So Alt D L, and that will open up data validation. And list is what you want. And if you press the F3 key in the source, you'll get a list of all your range names. And I want states. That's the plural. The previous one was state, which is what we used in that SUMIFS. So states plural. You can type it in as well. You can just type in, it'll show you in a minute, equals states, and that's it. So when I click the drop down, I get New South Wales. If I add another name to the bottom, it automatically pops up. So that's dynamic. Normally when you do a data validation, that's a problem. But when you use a range name with a formatted table, it's automated. Okay, let's look at some calculations that you might want to do in a formatted table. So let's create another one here. I'm just going to call this one data. So formatted table, Control T I'll use and hit enter. TBL data. I think that's right. Cool. Now, you might want to create a running total. Now, there's a couple of ways to do it. So so this is like a date going down. So we want a running total based on the amount, adding up the amount in the column. Now, you need to refer to a couple of things. You need to refer to a starting point and an ending point. The ending point's pretty easy because that's going to use that @ symbol that we used earlier, because you can just grab the value from the current line in amount. But I need to start somewhere, and I need to start on another line or another row. So that's the tricky bit. So here we go, equals sum. Now I'm going to click on B1. Now Excel puts that in there. So that's table data, headers, so that's the header row, and the amount cell, or the amount heading. Now sum ignores text. So because B1 has amount in it, I can start my calculation in that cell and it will get treated like a 0. So then I can go hash, it's not hash, colon. Now the colon doesn't appear. I don't know why. You got to press it twice. I don't know if that's just a quirk on my system, but you might need to press the colon twice to get it there. And then you click on the amount, which has then @ amount. So that's saying add up everything from the header row to the current row. And when I press enter, it's going to automatically copy down. So there we go. And if I add this up, I'll just add this up on the side here. Oop. Oh, my keyboard is going a bit slow. There we go. If I add that up, 3382, we can see that that's working. So the reason that works is because the header in a sum function, the sum function ignores the text. So text is treated as a 0 and it just adds up from the amount heading all the way down to the current row. So that's one way to do it. There is another way to do it. By the way, you can't have a heading that's the same. If you try and do it, Excel will change it and put a 1 on the end or something else. The headers, the heading row has to be unique. And if it's not unique when you start, when you define the table, Excel will change the names to make them unique because they have to be unique. Okay, so let's see another way to do that. So what you can do is you can refer to another cell. So here we go again, equals sum. And I'm going to refer to @ comma. And then I'm going to type in D1. So D1 is just a cell reference. but it's the cell reference in the cell above. And so when I hit enter, it's going to, oops, I don't want to do running total. Try that again. I want amount. There we go. So I was totaling the total there. So basically it's adding up D1 to the current row. So that's another way to get the running total, if you like. Now you might think you can do this plus that plus that, but that won't work because because D1 has text in it. Excel is going to crash and burn. Okay. The sum function is more flexible. So when you refer to a text cell with the sum function, it converts the text to 0. And so it doesn't crash and burn. So that's just a heads up on what Excel will do. Okay, another thing you might want to do, let's say we've got, I'll just add it to this one, as you'll see it, how quick it works. Let's say that I want to, actually I won't do it to this one, I'll just chuck it into this one. Which one do I put it into? I'll do it to this one because I think that's okay. I'll get rid of that. You got to be careful when you've got things touching your table. That's what I'm thinking about. Let's say that these are actuals and we want to put the word actuals in all of these cells. If you just type it, that's it. You got to type it, copy it, blah, blah, blah. If you put it within an equal sign, Excel thinks it's a formula, even though it's not really a formula. And so when you hit enter, it'll actually go all the way down the column. So if you did need to put some descriptor in there that applies to everything, that's an easy way to do it. So that's on page 10 of the notes. Sorry, I haven't been keeping up with my page numbers. Okay, let's create a pivot table. So here's our starting data. Formatted tables work seamlessly with pivot tables. Here we go. Insert, pivot. TBL sales is the name of this table. And I'm going to click OK. So now I can build, I must have clicked it twice, a pivot table. So I'm just going to build a very simple one. Let's put the category there. Let's put the product. I think there's only a couple of products and the value there. There you go. So the beauty with using the formatted table to do this is that as the data expands, when you hit refresh, right click on the table, refresh, it'll include any new rows that you've added to the table, which in the past was one of the issues with pivot tables and normal tables. So a formatted table automatically updates when it's refreshed. Okay, we can filter tables. So I can go back to this one and I can filter this table using, if we go to table design, what's called a slicer. So we were playing around with states before, so we can click state. So these are all the states that are listed. I can click Victoria. I can hold my control key and do Tassie and WA and New South Wales. So this is a really quick, easy way to filter a table. It's very intuitive. It's quick. You can obviously use the filter drop downs, but they're not as quick and easy as a slicer. These also can work with pivot tables too, in case you're unaware. And you can clear the filter as easy as that. So slicers work with tables, formatted tables. Now you may want to remove your table, as in not have the functionality. To do that, you just right click the table, go to table and say convert to range. And that will leave the colors there, but all of the functionality disappears. All of the numbers get converted, all of the formulas get converted to numbers. And there is another way to get that one. Convert to range is also in the table design options. So convert to range is there, and summarize with pivot is there as well. That's page 12 of the notes. Okay, let's get into some relationships. Here we go. Oh, actually, is there something else that I missed? Just bear with me. Okay, no, I think I did miss it. Oh, pasting rows. So sorry, back to page 10. I did want to show you this because this is something you sort of find out the hard way. So my data ends in column N here. So if I have something to paste on the end, so let's say this is more data. So that's to N. So when I copy that and paste it right at the end, so right click, I'll just go paste values. Okay, that automatically extends. Okay, all good, no problems, everything's good in the world. If you do this, you will have problems. Now, there's more columns in this data. Okay, so this data on the end doesn't really mean anything, but if the data you paste on the end is a different size, as in wider, then this happens. I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but notice it's not included in the data. And that's what the color coding helps you identify. Now, you can fix it by dragging that little icon. Now, again, my mouse cursor is a lot bigger, so that icon's fairly big. You can adjust it manually by dragging that down. Okay, so that is how you fix it if it happens, but you do need to make sure when you paste the data, it's the same width as the data. You can have blanks in the middle there, that's all good, but it needs to be at least the same width. Well, up to the same width. Okay, so I'll get rid of them. Okay, so that was, sorry, something on page 10 that I missed. Right, let's get into relationships. In my data here, my sales data, I've got a state. What I want to do is allocate those states to like a region. So these two are north, we got some south, we got some east, and we got some west. So I want to add this region as a way to basically chop up the data. So I want to do some slicing and dicing based on region. Now, in the old days, what you did, you would insert a column in the data and do a VLOOKUP to bring in the region based on a lookup of the state. That's what you'd normally do. But you don't need to do that anymore. What you can do is relate these two tables together, much like a relational database, and then report on them. So let's do that. Now, to do this, the table must be a formatted table. So I'm going to use Control-T on that one. Now, what I'm going to call it, I think I'm going to call it TBL regions. No, I'm going to call it TBL states. Ooh, that's a bit, what was this one called? I think I called that one TBL states. Oh no, that's TBL state. That's okay. So that's the singular. This one's going to be called TBL states, plural. Cool. Okay, TBL states. So that's the name of that one. So here we go. I'm going to go into data and I'm going to go into something called relationships. So that's the icon there. It's in data tools. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to relate these tables together based on columns in the data. So I'm going to go new, and we're on page 14 of the notes here, and I'm going to select TBL sales here, and the column is called sales state. The column names don't need to be the same. And then I'll go TBL states, which is the one I've just created, and I want to use the state. So that's the sales data, and this is the states. So did I put TBE? I didn't put TBL, so apologies for that. We'll click OK. So that goes through and it checks things and it's created it. Now, once you've got this relationship created, I can close that. We can use what's called the data model. So if you go Insert, Pivot, you can from data model, that's one option. I think if you click Pivot, there is another way. Yeah, I'll use that data model way. You can add this table to the data model, but I think it's already there. We'll try that. It's called TB states too, not TBL. That's in the notes. Okay, so no, don't want to use that. That didn't look right. Let's try it again. Insert Pivot from data model. I'll go a new worksheet. That's better. Now, this is all of the tables in the file. Notice there's these lines. Hopefully you can see those. Notice there's no line between sales, TBL sales, and TB states. That's because these two are related. So what I can do is I can go and grab the region from the TBL states, which was the north, south, east, west. Then I can grab, let's say, the product and the value, excuse me, from the TBL sales. So this is using two separate tables to summarize the TBL sales data. And remember that east, west, north was not in the data. Okay, that was in this other table, which was looking up all of the states. So based on the state, you get a different region. So it's like a relational database. It's not a relational database. It's like a relational database. So just a heads up on that. Now I am going to go over time a couple of minutes. So just a heads up on that. I don't think I've got any questions. I don't know if I'll do the XLOOKUP or not. We'll see how we go. Okay, last page, 16 of the notes, dynamic arrays. Now, I did use one already when I was struggling with the states there. I used the unique function. Now, a couple of things to look at with this function. This will automatically expand. It's called spilling. The formula is only in cell Q1, okay? If I put something in here, so if I put WA here, even though that's what's in the cell, you get what's called a spill error, okay? If you need to leave, that's all good. There is a feedback form on the way out, so if you could fill that in, that would be appreciated. We're nearly done here. I just wanted to give you a brief idea of the how you can use this dynamic arrays with tables. Okay, so if I get rid of and notice that the dotted line is telling me where I need to have a blank space. So I get rid of WA. And so now I can do that SUMIF S, excuse me, based on the state, over here a bit, comma. Now, watch what I can do. If I click Q1, I think I had P1 in the notes, hash. What that does, the hash refers to that spill range. So that range that goes down from the formula, I can automatically get this formula to spill down to match it. So that's adding up all of, and we can do a check over here. See if this one's right. Oh, we can add this up too. So that's adding up the column. To add up this column, I can click, whoop, it's going a little bit slow. There we go. R1 hash. The hash symbol refers to that spill range. And so that looks pretty good. And so this is dynamic arrays. There's quite a few dynamic array functions. I have covered them in some of my other webinars. I'll be covering them this year as well. I've updated a lot of my webinars now with dynamic arrays. So I'll be covering those as we go through the year. But dynamic arrays work pretty seamlessly with formatted tables. One thing though, you can't use a dynamic array formula inside a formatted table. So just a heads up on that. You can use them outside, but you can't use them inside the formatted table. Okay, so I'm going to have a drink of water. I'm going to check out and see if there's any questions. I don't think there are. And then I might wrap it up there, I think. That's all good. Okay, yeah, that's it, I think. So formatted tables are really, really powerful. I hope I've sort of shown you how powerful they are. They work with so many different Excel's built-in features already. And I said they automate a whole lot of things that you don't need to worry about. So like copying formulas down the column, all of the, using two tables with a pivot table, that sort of thing. So highly recommend formatted tables. Maybe in the feedback form, you could let me know if you're going to start using them, because that's what I was trying to get across here. So, or use them more if you've already started using them. But yeah, formatted tables, really, really powerful, really worth your time to, learn, play with them, and get used to them. Okay. The notes, someone's asked about the notes. If you check your emails, there's the, you can download the materials. I'll save this and I'll send this out to you with the link to the recording. Okay, completed. There we go.